TV7 Israel News is made possible thanks to your generous donations.
Shalom, good evening. This is TV7 Israel News broadcast to you from Jerusalem. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, during a joint press conference with U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, asserts that President Donald Trump and he closely coordinate all matters related to the Gaza Strip. After securing a new contract for France to operate Syria's Latakia port, Paris aims to reinvigorate its relations with Damascus. The Islamic Republic of Iran threatens the United States that if attacked, it will reciprocate. Israel and the United States are said to be closely coordinated on matters related to the Gaza Strip. President Donald Trump's deadline, which expired on Saturday at noon, concluded with the release of nearly 3 Israeli hostages, to include one dual American-Israeli national and another dual Russian-Israeli national, per the outline of the initial agreement. The 3 hostages, Yair Hon, Sagi Dekel, and Sasha Alexander Trufanov, were received by 2 separate hospitals, where they underwent initial medical examinations before, at long last, being reunited with their families.
Today marks the 6th stage on the return of the captives from terror organization captivity. The healthcare system received 3 more returnees who came back to Israel after 498 days. Sagi, Yair, and Sasha are reunited with their families in the Sheba and Ichilov medical hospitals. The returnees will meet the best medical teams who will treat them in the complex process of rehabilitation. The entire healthcare system stands firm and ready to provide the returnees with a comprehensive and medical and mental treatment. The stay in the hospital allows them to receive all the necessary care in a safe and supportive environment alongside their families while maintaining their privacy.
Meanwhile, on Sunday, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu hosted U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio at his office in Jerusalem, during the course of which the 2 men held lengthy discussions on a long list of regional matters. During their joint press conference, Premier Netanyahu seized the opportunity to respond to speculations related to the threat which President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu himself leveled toward the Islamist Hamas terrorist organization.
I thank Secretary Rubio for President Trump's assistance in helping us secure the release of another 3 hostages yesterday. These are hostages that Hamas refused to support only a few days earlier. And I also thanked him for America's unequivocal backing for Israel's policy in Gaza in moving forward. I want to assure everyone who's now listening to us, President Trump and I are working in full cooperation and coordination between us. We have a common strategy, and we can't always share the details of this strategy with the public, including when the gates of hell will be opened, as they surely will if all our hostages are not released until the last one of them.
Secretary Rubio, for his part, expanded on the American perspective vis-à-vis the Gaza Strip to include President Trump's plan for the terror-ridden territory.
There's been no stronger ally for Israel in the White House than President Trump. He's also a man that speaks clearly and unambiguously and makes clear his views on issues. The first he's made clear is, and as you've pointed out, and the hostages need to come home, they need to be released, and you work in very close coordination with him. He's working in very close coordination, but with the Prime Minister and his government, and ensuring that that happens. That must happen. It's not optional. And would add that that's a goal we share in common, and that is something we work on very closely together. The President's also been very bold about his view of what the future for Gaza should be. not the same tired ideas of the past, but something that's new, bold, and something that frankly took courage and vision in order to outline. And it may have shocked and surprised many, but what cannot continue is the same cycle where we repeat over and over again and wind up in the exact same place. Related to that, the president's been very clear. Hamas cannot continue as a military or government force. And frankly, as long as it stands as a force that can govern, or as a force that can administer, or as a force that can threaten by use of violence, peace becomes impossible. They must be eliminated. They must be eradicated.
Prime Minister Netanyahu and Secretary Rubio also discussed the fluid situation in Syria at length, with Washington's top diplomat explicitly stating that Syria replacing one destabilizing force with another is not a positive development.
We also discussed the situation in Syria after the collapse of Assad's regime, a collapse that was made possible by Israel's weakening of Iran's terror axis, especially the weakening of Hezbollah and the removal of Nasrallah. For over a decade before October 7th, Israel acted to prevent Iran from developing new terror fronts against us in Syria, right opposite the Golan Heights and deeper in Syria. And we conducted hundreds of airstrikes, perhaps 1,000, in order to prevent it, and we did. Now, if any other force in Syria today believes that Israel will permit other hostile forces to use Syria as a base of operations against us, they are gravely mistaken. Israel will act to prevent any threat from emerging near our border in southwest Syria.
And while the fall of Assad is certainly promising and important, if Syria replacing one destabilizing force for another is not a positive development. And that is something that we will watch very carefully as we seek to craft our own strategy with regards to how to approach the events in Syria.
It is important to highlight that while Israel and the United States are seemingly aligned by opposing the al-Qaeda-affiliated Hayat Tahrir al-Sham or HTS taking over Syria, France, on the other hand, is keen on consolidating HTS power in Damascus. Merely a few days after HTS agreed on a new contract with French shipping and logistics group CMA-CGM to operate Syria's Latakia port's container terminal, French President Emmanuel Macron hosted a conference for Syria, during the course of which he called for the lifting of sanctions over Syria and reiterated a French commitment to donate over 50 million euros in aid, among a long list of other activities.
France will keep the commitment I made since 2018 to dedicate 50 million euros to humanitarian and stabilization aid for the Syrians. And with the imminent resumption of our diplomatic activity in Damascus, a delegation of our workers, including the French Development Agency, will travel to Syria shortly to discuss the priorities you have identified for your country.
Returning to the joint press conference in Jerusalem, during which Secretary Rubio addressed the common denominator to all belligerents in the Middle East.
The common theme in all of these challenges is Iran. It is the single greatest source of instability in the region. Behind every terrorist group, behind every act of violence, behind every destabilizing activity, behind everything that threatens peace and stability for the millions of people who call this region home, is Iran. And by Iran, I mean the Ayatollahs. By Iran, I mean its regime. A regime who, by the way, its people don't support. The people of Iran are victims of that regime. And so I think it's important to constantly point that whether we talk about Hamas, or we talk about Hezbollah, or we talk about violence in the West Bank, or we talk about destabilization in Syria, or we talk about any of these issues, the militias in Iraq, they all have behind them one common theme: Iran. And that must be addressed. And there can never be a nuclear Iran. A nuclear Iran that could then hold itself immune from pressure and from action. That can never happen.
It is important to highlight that Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian announced that he would adopt a decree by the Islamic Republic Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei to reject any form of negotiations with the United States. The announcement by Pezeshkian comes after Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei threatened the United States that if it launched an attack, the Islamic Republic would reciprocate.
نشستن
Americans are sitting and redrawing the world map on paper, but it is only on paper. It has no reality. If they threaten us, we will threaten them. If they act on their threats, we will act on ours.
اگر این تهدید را عملی کنن ما هم تهدید را عملی میکنیم.
Thank you for watching TV7 Israel News. TV7 Israel is a non-profit ministry with all of our productions exclusively reliant on the generosity of our viewers. Therefore, if you're blessed by the content of our programs, I would like to encourage you, support TV7 Israel with a donation. You can do so via our website at www.tv7israelnews.com. Separately, I'd also like to encourage you as ever, pray for the peace of Jerusalem and salvation of Israel. I'm Jonathan Hassan wishing you a Shavua Mevorach, and God willing, we will see you during our next update. Until then, Shalom from Jerusalem.